Hey everybody, we're going to get started in just a minute. Thank you for the heart emojis. Thank you for all of that. I love feeling this energy. Introduce yourself in the chat. Please let us know where you're coming in from. City, state, if you're part of a local group, a local Indivisible group, let us know where you're coming in from. That's going fast, but it's everywhere. The chat can't even be. Hey everybody, we're going to get started in just a minute. Thank you. With another great to see everybody from every part of the country, purple states, rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas. Thank you for being with us tonight. We're going to get started. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Indivisible's strategy for fighting Trump 2.0. I am so thrilled to be here with you all this evening. It is great to be in community. Let's get this kicked off. My name is Ezra Levin. I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of Indivisible. And many of you I know were here with us last week. I just want to note one really important thing. The fascists win. They win by making us think that we are alone and powerless. Well, look, nearly 50,000 of you picked yourself up off the floor after an election result that ripped our hearts out, and you signed up to figure out what you can do next. We're going to be joined by our special guest here, Senator Warren, in just a second. Leah, Indivisible's co-executive director, co-founder. She's going to join me for a deep dive and discussion into the new Indivisible guide. Before we get started, a couple of quick notes, some housekeeping. Please hit the CC button if you need closed captions. Easy to do. You just press that little button. It's there. If you like closed captions, you can turn them on that way. We're going to leave the chat open throughout, and we're welcoming your conversation, your processing. We're building community here, y'all. We're being in community together. So please join the conversation. But with that note, let me also say, you all know this has been a really rough week for basically everybody on this call. Leah and I left the kids over with my mom over the weekend to work on this guide, but it was not just us. We had rounds of edits from dozens of folks, brilliant minds within the Indivisible team, group leaders, experts, movement leaders. Lots of folks on this call are very low on sleep right now and themselves are still going through the stages of grief, still trying to figure out what comes next. So yes, the chat is open. We want to be part of this community with y'all, but please, let me just ask you, please be respectful and kind to each other, especially right now. Feelings are raw. We need to be good to each other because we need each other in this moment. So we have a lot of content to cover with you all today. We are going to have some live Q&A. We're going to have some live Q&A at the end of this, okay? So you can put in questions in the chat. We're not going to be able to get to everything, but we're going to try to do our best to get to the questions that are popping up the most. So if you have questions, use the Q&A function on this Zoom, and you can put them in, and we'll get to them at the end. And lastly, there is a recording. We're going to be sending a follow-up email with all the links, all the resources, everything that we share here tonight. So I'm going to turn it over in a sec. I just know it's really easy in times like these to think our actions don't matter very much. But I love seeing all this love in the chat. It's really moving really fast, but shout yourself out, shout others out. I know some folks are feeling alone where they are. They're feeling disconnected. There aren't enough of us. Well, there are a lot of us here tonight. I hope this call allows you to feel like you're not alone, that your work does matter, and that there is indeed a path forward for all of us together. When you're going through hell, keep going. The point of this call is not to pretend like everything's going to be okay or that there are simple solutions for the catastrophe that's coming at all of us. But the point is they put in front of the other, and we're going to travel this road together, which is why I am so excited to introduce our special guest this evening, Senator Elizabeth Warren. My gosh, fresh off her most recent re-election win, Senator Warren has been one of the strongest allies of Indivisible since our very early days when we were fighting to save the Affordable Care Act. She is a brilliant, kind, inspirational leader. She always has a plan. You might recall, nevertheless, she persisted, became a rallying cry during the first Trump term for folks who were opposing the anti-democratic extremism of MAGA. So I am thrilled to hand the floor over to the persister-in-chief, Senator Warren, please.
Thank you very much, Ezra. Thank you. It is so good to be here with all of you. I'm loving these heart emojis and thumbs up, and I'm watching the cities and towns and communities that are coming by. It's good to be together. I want to start where Ezra is on this. I am sad. And I have fear. I am worried for people we love, for people who are our fellow human beings. And it's going to be tough out there. But the consequence of our sadness and our fear cannot be that we fold up. The consequence has to be that we reach down deep and we fight back. It is more important now for us to fight back than ever. So here's how I think about this at this moment. In Congress, us, the guys in the Senate and in the House, the Democrats need to fight every fight in Congress. We can't just stand here and watch the parade go by. And sometimes, not every minute, not every fight, but sometimes we are going to need you to be in this fight with us and to support us in this fight. And sometimes what that will mean is that we got to go after the people in power, the Republicans. Sometimes we're going to need to push the Democrats harder so that they are in the right place as we do these fights. So we've still got a lot of tools, and we're going to use those tools. We're going to fight Trump in the courts. If he breaks the law, we're going to be there. I understand he may win a lot of those fights. I get it that he owns the Supreme Court, but you can slow him down, and that's not nothing. And sometimes you can get enough power around something that they will decide to back down on their own. And I know everybody's tired right now. People are feeling kind of discouraged, but we're going to have elections in 2025 and 2026. Democrats are going to have to earn back voters' trust by making the case that we will unrig this economy and that we will put government on the side of working people. And I think as more of the Trump show reveals itself, drawing that contrast is actually going to be easier. Nothing about what lies ahead is an easy path. It's not the path we wanted. It's not the path we fought for. But I believe in this country, and I believe in you, the people who are on this call. And I believe too much in this country and in you to walk away from this fight. So when Ezra asked if I would be here tonight, I said, I want to be here. I want to be with the people that it is such an honor to fight alongside, because we're going to do this together. So I think, Leah, are we going to be able to do a couple of questions maybe?
That's right. That's right. As I think Ezra's got the questions to tee up.
Okay.
Okay, so just a couple, Senator Warren, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for fighting alongside us and being such a leader and directing us where we need to go. I think we are strongest when there is an inside-outside game where we have leaders who we can count on the inside, and on the outside, we can generate that kind of energy that helps you do the work that you're trying to do in the Senate. When you're thinking of the next 68 days to prepare for the Trump administration and the folks on this call who are trying to understand what they can do, what do you think is the most important thing for folks here to do? Not thinking about 2025, but over the next 68 days, what do you think they should focus on?
Perfect question, because boy, do we have an action item here. And that is the focus right now. Yeah, I'm hearing this stuff come out from Trump and what he's planning to do right now is that we need to demand action from the Democrats who are still in power. Keep in mind, the United States Senate, not the House and the Senate is the one that confirms the judges, confirms the regulators, and everybody on this call should demand that we do that. This is the moment where we absolutely cannot let disappointment turn into resignation. It's going to be hard to engage people in these fights. I get it. Exhaustion is real. But the people who are counting on us cannot afford for us to give up now. So think of it this way. Right now, 68 days, Democrats are still in control. And for every judge that we get confirmed, that is a lifetime appointment. And I just want to be nerdy for 1 second here, so everybody's following me on this. I get it. They have a Supreme Court that I believe is extremist. I believe it doesn't follow the law, but understand this. Not all the cases make it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The majority stop right there at the Court of Appeals, and there's a lot more balance in those courts of appeals. We get our Court of Appeals judges confirmed. That gives some stability to the court system. Second part I want to say about it is, and below that are the district court judges. Those are the judges you go to first. Those are the ones who do the hearings, who build the evidentiary rules. And that, quite frankly, is where most cases stop. So the importance of getting these judges through, this is real. You push the Democrats, please, push those Democrats to use every single minute between now and when we lose power to confirm those judges and to confirm people to the agencies who have term of years. So we have a list of them, agency appointments where Trump can't come in and just fire them just because there's a new administration. We need to get those people confirmed. So this is the place that you could have the absolute biggest impact right now. And I know everybody's coming off a lot of hard fighting, but you could really make a big difference here by pushing on the Democrats who are in the Senate right now.
We love getting nerdy here. We love getting specific. We love getting practical. That's
my
what
guys.
we do. We try to demystify and give people practical advice. So you heard the senator. You heard the senator. What you can do right now is encourage your Democrats to actually vote for these confirmations. Do not obey in advance. Do not give Trump power he doesn't have. And power he doesn't have right now is the U.S. Senate. We still got it. Let's use it while we've got it. Okay, second question, Senator, before we get nerdy ourselves. We first got connected, I believe, during that fight for the Affordable Care Act. And one of the main dynamics there was having you and others on the inside fighting the good fight, and then us on the outside, along with other groups that we were partnering with on the outside, building up constituent pressure. As a senator, as somebody who's running an office, can you talk a little bit about what is it like to have a Senate office like yours or your colleagues and have constituents outside pushing? What does that feel like? How does it land? What works?
So this is a wonderful question. I'm so glad you asked about this one, Ezra. It really is. We get things done inside outside game. It's either one is powerful, but together they are multiples more powerful. And I want to put a plug in for a specific way of bringing pressure. Look, there are a lot of great organizations that rally people at election time. That's great. Good for you guys. I appreciate that. What is so special about Indivisible is exactly the word you used about this, Ezra. You demystify Congress and you help people influence their representatives. So I'm glad you mentioned the ACA, because I think a lot about the ACA repeal fight as an example of your impact. And that's in two ways. The first one is just to remind everybody, this was right after Donald Trump got elected. Donald Trump announced he's going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Everybody needs to remember that means you go back to discriminating against everybody who's got a pre-existing condition. You kids under the age of 25 don't get to stay on their parents' plans. And a lot of people just lose their health care outright, won't have access to health care. We did not have the votes. Anybody who was going to bet money was going to say, it's gone. Republicans own the House, they own the Senate. And Donald Trump says he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Just kiss it all goodbye. We got nothing. And if you all had given up, that is exactly where we would be. But instead, you got in that fight. You stayed in that fight. It may have felt like pushing a boulder uphill. Talk about setbacks. I want to remind everybody the first vote was in the House, and they voted to repeal it. And then they all went over to the White House and had a big party, popped the beers so that they could all celebrate taking away health care from millions and millions of people. You talk about a low moment. But the fact that we were doing inside, outside, and you all were organized, you were pushing on those offices, you were in the faces of everybody, Democrats to hold the line, and how many Republicans could we peel off? I was on the floor the night that John McCain was the ultimate one, but remember, we had others we had to get there. It took 3 Republican votes to be able to withstand and protect the Affordable Care Act so that the repeal failed. That was your work. And let's remember, that was 2017. How many million people kept their health insurance because of the work you did? How many people with pre-existing conditions still get treatment, pay like everybody else? And how many kids made it on through school, through that first job, through that first business, a period of time maybe where they didn't have any income coming in, and still were able to stay on their parents' health insurance policies? That is incredibly powerful, what you accomplished. And we do that together, not because you get organized every 4 years or every 2 years for an election, but because you're there to keep pushing on the pieces of legislation that come up and the changes we need. You know, it takes 50 strikes of the hammer to break through once, but the impact you have when you do break through is truly transformational. Millions of people have healthcare because you fought back, and millions of people have hope because you stay in this fight. I'm honored to be here with you tonight, but more than that, I know that we're going to be in these fights together, day by day by day, whatever comes next.
Senator Warren, I'm at a loss for words. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We are in this fight because you're in there fighting for us too, and we want to be as helpful as we can. You're getting, hey, everybody in the chat, give Senator Elizabeth Warren some love. There are a lot of folks all around this country in this movement who are 100% behind you. We're going to be there every step of the way. Thank you for joining us tonight. Now we're going to get real nerdy, and we're going to get into the specifics of how people can fight back on their home turf. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay. So you heard the senator, folks. We got to fight back. And that's what this new Indivisible guide is all about. We're going to now shift into the segment where we dive into the details, where Leah and I are going to go in and talk through how we can actually start organizing our power in this moment. I'm going to start, though, by saying a little bit of what this guide is and what this guide is not. What this guide is, at a high level, it is a short-term strategy over the next 2 years. We're trying to get the next 2 years to live and fight another day. It's an on-ramp for new folks to join up, do their part wherever they live. It's a set of strategy, tactics, and tips. It is most of all a start. It should be adapted and expanded and innovated by you all on this call and others. What it is not, to be clear, is everything we need to do. It does not answer all the questions about the future of the Democratic Party. Good questions we should have, good discussions we should have. It's not a plan for how we win in 2028 or the proactive policy agenda that Democrats need to put together. That's also a good discussion. And I hope folks on this call are going to discuss it. That's not what this is. Instead, this is a 30-page practical guide. We have a summary, but it's 30 pages because we tried to make this specific and practical and give you guidance for what you can actually do. We are going to cover a ton on the rest of this call over the next 30 or 40 minutes. I don't expect everybody here to leave this call with their own personal roadmap for the next 2 years in the next 30 minutes. It's not going to happen. There's not going to be a quiz after this call. What there are going to be are briefing sessions next week and the following week. If you want them, you can join a live Q&A chat with me and Leah next week, next Thursday. We're going to keep on doing those. Indivisible, we're here to help. We're here to help, but you all are leading this fight on the ground. Indivisible, we're in this fight for the long haul. I hope this is a useful start. I hope this guide and this session is a useful start. But most of all, I hope it is only a start. It's only a start. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to somebody who I think, honestly, is one of the most brilliant strategic thinkers in all of the pro-democracy, progressive spaces in this country. I happen to be married to her, but I'd say that regardless. Leah Greenberg, co-executive, co-founder of Indivisible. Take it away.
Thank you, Ezra. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be here with you tonight. I am gonna just start off I see a couple new folks in the chat. And for you all, I am gonna start us off with a quick explanation of how we got started. So you got a little bit of that backstory. So about 8 years ago, right after Trump was elected in 2016, Ezra and I wrote a Google Doc called Indivisible, a practical guide. And it drew on the lessons that we had learned as former congressional staffers about what makes an elected official listen and respond to pressure. Pretty basic stuff. Get a group of people together in your community, focus on that congressperson who represents you, push them hard or be there to support them depending on which way they're going, and don't give an inch. Stuff that we had seen work in our time on the Hill. We put that online in December 2016, and it swiftly made its way into the hands of thousands of activists across the country, people who in many cases had already begun organizing to stop Trump and to save as much as possible. Now, thousands of those folks began indivisible groups in every state in the country. And over the next 4 years, together, we collectively fought Trumpism, from saving the Affordable Care Act to building the largest blue wave margins in history in 2018 to kicking Trump out of office in 2020. So if you are here and you have been in the fight this whole time, you have our deepest appreciation. If you are new and looking to figure out how to get involved, you are welcome and you are needed. We are sad and we are mad as hell that this is where we are tonight, but we are grateful to be in this fight with you. So with that, I'm going to start walking through the guide. So I'm going to start with chapter 1. What just happened? Our analysis of what happened is important for our strategy on what's next. So first, I want to say up front, we are working with some limited information. There are notoriously unreliable exit polls flying around. We're going to try and stay at a pretty high level with some top-line observations. So the first is, this election was part of a pretty striking trend of voters globally turning hard on incumbent parties who were in office during that post-COVID inflation period. Around the world, basically every incumbent party that has been up for an election has lost support. We hoped to outperform that overall trend by nature of the fact that we were running against such an obviously and profoundly unsuitable person, but we were swimming up against a steep tide. The second point I want to highlight is we saw about a 7-point swing on average in non-swing states in this election in the presidential, and we saw about a 3-point swing in swing states. And that is an important fact because it means that where we matched our ground game and our ads with their ground game and their ads, we did a lot better. And it wasn't enough to outswim the tide, but it really mattered. And if you were working on the ground in one of those states, in Arizona, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Nevada, it is true we lost the presidency, but your work absolutely helped save crucial Senate seats that we are going to need in the years ahead. Third point I want to pull out, there's a lot to work through in the results, right? But what is clear is that this election hinged on voters, especially working class voters who have been drifting away from the Democratic Party for a long period of time. Folks who were frustrated with the status quo and with higher prices, who feel like democracy and the economy is not working for them, who took that out either by flipping to Trump or by not voting at all. And we could not convince, and this makes me very, very sad, we could not convince them that the threat of Trump's dictatorial approach or Project 2025 agenda would outweigh that frustration they felt. Focus groups actually regularly found that voters simply did not believe that Trump was going to do the things that he said out loud he would do. So voters rejected that status quo, but it doesn't mean they actually want what Trump is about to unleash. Now, the fact is, Trump managed to turn himself into a change candidate. And that is infuriating, but it also points to the path forward because once he takes office, he sheds that mantle of change and he becomes the avatar of corruption, of chaos, of extremism. Remember, he won by literally putting as much distance between himself and Project 2025 as he could. That is his policy agenda. That is not a separation that he can maintain once he is in office. Once his team starts putting that agenda into action, you see it already. And that means that we can break up this fragile coalition and pull those folks back, pull in some of those non-voters, build ours. Our work defining Trump 2.0 and its apologists by their worst and their most devastating policies, it begins now.
So I'm going to cover chapter 2. And this is the end. What Leah covered is important for setting the stage for everything else, but that's the end of political analysis. We're not just here to be armchair political analyzers. Now we get into practical, what we actually do. I saw in the chat some comments. I'm in Indiana. I just have Republicans. I added a local Indivisible group. It's not me anymore. How do I start it up again? How do I find other people? These are the questions. These are the good questions you should be asking. And that's what we're going to get into now, because the bottom line that we're facing now is that you have a role to play. Red states, blue states, purple states, urban areas, suburban areas, rural areas. There is a role for you. It's not just about Congress. It's much bigger than that. So we start chapter 2 with more or less a refresher of constituent power. If you've been with Indivisible for a while, you know constituent power. It's basically, are you able to be a pain in the butt to your representatives, to push them to do things that they might not otherwise do? We heard from Senator Warren how we applied that to Congress, but we can't just apply it to Congress anymore. We can't just apply it to Congress anymore. Members of Congress, yes, they care about re-election, but you know who else cares about re-election? Mayors, governors, state representatives, state senators. There are 500,000 elected officials in this country, 500,000 elected officials, 500,000 people in this country who depend on your vote in order to get power and build their power. Donald Trump wants you to think he's all powerful. And don't get me wrong, the presidency is powerful. The Congress is powerful. That's not the only place where power resides in this country. Constituent power, whether applied at the local level, the state level, or the federal level, that's our tool. That's our tool in this moment. So how do you use this power? How do you use this power? It's not rocket science. It's not that hard. We've been doing it for years now. You organize locally. You focus on your local officials. Again, local, state, federal. You show up. Everything else that we're going to talk about over the next 32 minutes, everything else builds on this basic strategic insight into how power actually works in American democracy. But importantly, when we wrote the Indivisible Guide back in 2016, we focused purely on Congress. That's what Elizabeth Warren was just talking about, purely on Congress. That has to change because the world has changed. Trump 2.0 is very different than Trump 1.0. Look, the Republican Party is owned by MAGA and Trump right now. You got to recognize that. We have limited leverage over safe Republicans and safe districts. The media environment's worse. Social media is a mess. MAGA is entrenched in the courts. The Republicans are far more aligned. And a lot of electeds, even if they're outside gerrymandered districts, some of these Republicans, they've simply stopped holding public meetings. They've stopped meeting with press and actually answering hard questions. The world is different, which is why the key shift in this guide is away from purely focusing just on members of Congress and broadening the scope to focus on where you actually have leverage. Maybe it is your senator. Maybe it is your representative. Maybe it's not. Maybe you don't have somebody that's going to listen to you there, but you might have somebody in the governor's mansion. You might have somebody in City Hall. You might have somebody who's a city council person. Now let's talk about then, how do you actually identify that leverage and what you can do with it? Leah, back to you.
Thank you. One thing I want to say, because I know there are folks on this call across Indivisible groups all over the place who have been organizing at the local level, at the state level this entire time. And a lot of you are like, yeah, we know. But what we want, so I want to acknowledge and recognize the work that has already gone on in a lot of setting the conditions for today that has been happening. And I want to also just say in this moment, what we are asking people to do is really embrace collectively, all of us, folks who are new to the work, folks who have been in the work for a long time, that fundamental idea, right? That Trump wants to believe he can be a dictator from day one. That's not how power works in this country. It is distributed across a lot of places. As organized local constituents of all those places, we have power. We have power we tap into that's going to counteract his assault on our country, on our values, that we use to hold off harm and protect each other, that we use to define him and his appalling agenda and split his coalition apart and build ours, that we're going to use to protect elections and absolutely stomp them in the midterms. That is the plan at the very high level. So next slide. Before we dive into the specific things that we're going to do, you might ask, why are we making 2026 the goal? And I want to say the short answer is, it's because we got to start somewhere. But the longer answer is, it is a hinge point. It is the point at which we will test on the national scale our ability to hold semi-free and fair elections. And the outcomes of 2026 set us on a path towards either a successful democratic transition or a path towards full authoritarianism. If we win, we take the House. We have a whole new set of tools to check Trump. More importantly, the people who win the elections in 2026 run the elections in 2028. So if those people care about democracy, we got a shot. If those are governorships, secretaries of state, local election boards that are packed with MAGA deniers or MAGA election deniers, we've got trouble. So with that, I want to talk about three big plays, because getting here is going to require us to operate like a giant pro-democracy team. Some of us are going to play offense. Some of us are going to play defense. It is going to be based on an appraisal of where your leverage is. Is it local? Is it federal? Is it state? In some cases, is it pretty limited by who you've got as your representatives across the board? And it requires a strategy where we're all going to lean into the places where we have the greatest power to block harm, to break up their coalition, to build ours. So these are the three plays at the top level that we're going to walk you through. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Ezra to walk through each one by one.
Thanks, Leah. And I just want to acknowledge yet again, we're covering a lot here, folks. We're getting into specifics, and there's a lot more in the guide itself. Our plan is to give a rapid drive-by of everything in here, but there are details and practical steps and ideas of what you can actually do in your area. So I'd highly recommend digging into it after this call and showing up at one of our Q&A sessions or one of our briefing calls so that we can really make this practical and applied. So with that said, play one is throwing in to say no to Project 25, to this horrific agenda being pushed by the White House and by Congress. Look, some of the things we're going to be able to stop, some of the things we're going to be able to slow down, some of the things we're able to blunt, and some of the things, maybe they get it done, but they take political damage by doing it. Case in point, this isn't theoretical. We heard about the Affordable Care Act. That's basically what this was. That's how we played the Affordable Care Act in definitive. But we don't have to go back to 2017 to find an example. This very week, we have an example of that. There was a bill called HR 9495. This was a bill that was not getting much attention, but what it would have done was give Donald Trump power to go after his enemies domestically, to label nonprofits as quote unquote terrorist organizations, so that he could take away their status. It was designed to give the executive branch power to do this. And Democrats were not paying attention. Indivisible hosted an event with the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We work with our allies there. We work with pro-democracy organizations across the country. And 2 nights ago, the Dems in the House who we were allying with said, hey, this might pass. We're worried that the Dems are just going to vote for it. And we raised the alarm. We said, hey, everybody out there, do you want to give Trump more power? Do you want Dems voting to give Trump more power? Call your member of Congress. Tell them that you don't want that. And you know what happened? We got enough Dems to vote against it. We killed the damn bill. We killed it. Does this save American democracy? No, we're under no illusion that it does. But does it do some good? Does it prevent some of the harm that Trump is going to try to do? Does it slow down their effort to take over our democracy? Abso-freaking-lutely. That's what this looks like. There are going to be 1,000 of these kind of fights in the months and years to come. And we got to be on the lookout for them. Slide 2, or play 2 here. We need to be playing hardball where Democrats are in control. Maybe it's at the local level. Maybe it's at the city level. Maybe it's at the state level. We need them to be active, entrepreneurial fighters to block and to delay and to challenge MAGA attacks. Let me tell you something that's incredible. In 2017, we had 6 Democratic trifecta states. By trifecta, I mean the governor was a Democrat and the state legislature was controlled by Democrats. You know how many Democratic trifecta states we have headed into 2025? 15. We have 15 Democratic trifecta states. That is a huge shift in power, a huge shift in power. These states can preserve progress. They can protect people. They can pick fights with MAGA. They can protect blue staters, yeah, but they can also leverage their state's economic and political power to project that power beyond their own state. Basic questions. Again, you can dig into the guide for ideas of how you can use that power. Are your Democratic electeds passing legislation to protect you? Your neighbors, your red state neighbors who are seeking safety, are they pushing back against MAGA efforts to target your neighbors? Are they working with other Democrats to create alliances across states and compacts? Are they using their economic leverage to advance our values? How will they protect labor, civil rights, environmental standards? When Stephen Miller pushed forward a nationwide deportation force to terrorize families in our neighborhoods, in our communities, are your blue state governors, are your blue state legislatures standing up? Or are they saying, oh, I disagree with that, but there's nothing we can do? No, we need them to fight back, and you can push them to fight back. Brings us to play 3. Now, there are, I'm sorry to say, a set of places, especially in purple states and districts, where election deniers and saboteurs won. They won last week. And that's dangerous for us headed into 2025 and 2026 and beyond to 2028. We need to protect our ability to have elections in this country, but we specifically need to be organizing in these swing places, in these purple places, against what is really a resurgent election denier movement. That means organizing over the next 2 years with a real focus, especially in these areas, on what can set us up for 2026. Accountability, strategic campaigns, focusing on the minutia of election administration so we are a watchful eye and they aren't pulling fast ones over on us. We need free and fair elections in 2025 and 2026 so we can get to 2028. And there's a major role for you to play, even if you're not in one of these states where the governor can fight back, even if you're not in one of these congressional districts where your member will listen to you, you might have a role to play in one of these other districts. Again, I'm just going to say it one more time. We're doing Q&A. I bet you got questions. You can use the Q&A chat feature here in the Zoom call. We're going to get to as many as we can, focusing on ones that came in a lot. But this isn't the only chance in Q&A. We're having a briefing session next week, a Q&A with me and Leah live to answer questions next week. Another briefing section the week of Thanksgiving. We want to answer questions and help you apply this so you don't have to immediately have a plan coming out of this. We're going to work on this together going forward. And also, there's a lot here. So I'm going to just take a pause. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to tell you all, we're going to get this done together. We're going to get this done together. And it's not just going to be fighting back policy, but we're going to do it by showing up for each other. We're going to show up for each other in this moment. That's really, really important. And Leah's going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, regardless of where you are, blue, red, or purple. Leah?
That's right. So Ezra talked about the geographic plays. I'm going to talk about what we'll do everywhere, which is organizing in solidarity to protect people and communities that are going to be targeted for harm by this administration, by Congress, by state and local actors, because red states have been the laboratory for these attacks over recent years, and they are emboldened and will escalate during this time. We know some of the predictable targets, right? Immigrants, trans kids, and LGBTQ people, communities of color, Muslims, racial justice advocates, pro-Palestine and anti-war movement activists. The key point that I want to name here, just at the strategic level, is that this is a moral imperative, but it is also a strategic imperative when facing fascists who operate with a divide and conquer strategy. And I want to come back to the example that Ezra gave of HR 9495, which Congress really was hoping to pass without anybody even noticing, right? Obscure legislation. This was legislation that was put forward, framed as quote unquote anti-terrorist act legislation that focused on criminalizing organizing by anti-war pro-Palestine activists. And that is an exact demonstration of how regressive forces try to go after those targeted groups. And in doing so, they create the precedents and the ability to crack down on the rest of us too. So that is why when we say we treat an attack on one as an attack on all during this time, it is a moral commitment, but it is also about how we all get through this together. Now, We're going to talk a little bit quickly about organizing locally in solidarity with folks under threat, because often your greatest impact is going to be going hyper-local and plugging in with work that is already happening. That's especially in red areas where the risks are greatest, the threats are most imminent. This could look like mutual aid, volunteering and getting involved with your local immigrant rights organization. It could look like getting involved in state or local campaigns to fight off harm from trying to stop legislation, or fighting off a local school board effort to go after civil rights history or trans kids. However it starts, and I'm hesitant to get too specific because the specifics have to be determined based on where you are and what is needed. The most important thing is about getting connected locally, is about plugging in with work that is already happening with communities that have already been organizing here. And it's about organizing yourself so that when you do that, you can offer really tangible support for people who are going to be under a lot of threat and a lot of stress right now. All right, I'm going to close my part with a little bit about operating under what we're calling authoritarian creep. So fascists would like us to believe that winning a single election is game over for democracy. We are not going to preconcede that power to them. We also recognize that we are operating under conditions that are increasingly repressive, what we're calling authoritarian creep. This is not new. Folks on this call from red states, people of color, Muslim activists, they have often operated under difficult repressive conditions for some time. But it is reasonable to be afraid in this moment, particularly for folks that are part of the groups that we know MAG is coming for, about what risks for personal security, for your own well-being, for surveillance might come with activism. And this risk falls unevenly, but it is real. Now, the guide is going to include some resources for you as an activist to assess and mitigate some of those security risks, everything from physical safety to protests to digital security and privacy to more. I am not going to walk you through it all tonight, but it's in there and I encourage you to follow up. But I'm going to say something about what it means to organize under these conditions. The risk is real, but here's the thing. It is also a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we are pulling back out of fear, the risk increases because a smaller number of people are easier to isolate. Holding open space for dissent in this country is going to require a large number of people, as many people in as many places as possible, to organize and dissent in as many ways as possible. Solidarity with those first folks targeted is an imperative but it's also that strategic one. It helps us to push back on the future attacks on all of us. And widespread, broad-based opposition, that is what makes it harder for our adversaries to crack down and raises the cost of repression. And the absence of broad opposition, that's what makes it easier to throw the book at the people who are dissenting. There's not an easy answer here. You are going to have to determine the level of risk that you're personally willing to accept based on your own circumstances. But what we can tell you is that we will not get out of this mess without many, many people choosing to accept at least some risk.
Thanks, Leah. So let's talk about what's coming up now. We have a chapter in the guide that we end with, and it is very practical and it's technical. It's how you find and start a local Indivisible group. A lot of folks on this call are part of groups or have led groups themselves. If you haven't, that's a step-by-step guide. I'm not going to go through it here because y'all can look at it and we can help you through it. But there's a quote in this guide that I want to repeat. It's from Timothy Snyder. He's a famed historian of authoritarianism and wrote the book On Tyranny. And he recently had an interview. And this quote really stood out to me. He said, "They want you to be alone. Nobody is going to fix this alone. That's not how this works. We're not going to do this by ourselves. Individuals in this country, unless you're super rich or super famous, you don't have much power as an individual. Groups of individuals, on the other hand, you do have power if you organize it. Everything that we've talked about here is not possible for an individual to do on their own. You do it by forming a local group or finding a local group in your community. Look, I like online groups just as much as the rest of you, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about finding folks in your town, in your city, in your neighborhood, and connecting with them to fight back based on who represents you, maybe at the city level, maybe at the state level, maybe at the national level. But it starts with that group. And it starts with people. This is a people-powered movement. We are not going to beat the fascists if we have a small group of folks and that's it pushing back. So I'm going to ask for help. Yes, I want you to read this guide. I want you to dig into it, but I also want your help getting this guide out there to your group chats, to your social media, to your friends, to your families, for folks who you know who are distraught, for people who put up a Kamala Harris sign in their yard, people who could be part of this fight. We need them to know that they have a role right now and that we need them. So if you're an Indivisible group leader, awesome. Thanks for joining. Discuss the guide. Talk about the place. Talk about what actually applies to you. Make a copy of the Google Doc. That's fine. Make it and then cut out the parts that don't apply and just look at the parts that apply. That's great. We hope you use it that way. If you're a group member, cool. Show up to your next Indivisible group meeting ready to discuss. Maybe bring a friend. Again, we need more folks. And for you new folks, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. We need you in this movement. There may be a local Indivisible group near you. That's awesome. If it looks like the right vibe to you, by all means, go join that local Indivisible group. But if there isn't one near you, or you're like, but I want to focus on this other issue and they're not doing that, that's fine too. You can start an Indivisible group. Some of the most powerful Indivisible groups in this movement were started by a couple people who got together and said, I guess we got to do something. And then they built that Indivisible group up from there, and they became a powerhouse in their own community. That works. It's not that complicated. You just have to be able to commit the time to do it. We have a single sign-up form that you can click. We'll put it in the chat so you can see. In this form, you're going to tell us, hey, I would like to be part of this in some way. I'm either already part of a group and I would like more members who are coming out of the woodwork now, send them to me, or I'm looking for a group. Please tell me where there is one and we'll connect you. Or, hey, I looked, I don't think there's a group out there. I would like to start one. How do I do that? Any of those is fine. Any of those are fine answers. We got a ton of folks on the Indivisible team who are working behind the scenes to make sure we're connecting people who do have an interest in defending this democracy in this moment, who want to do their part in their own community. We're going to help you find each other. We're going to help you find your own group so we can fight back together. Now, with all that said, we need to be able to communicate with each other. And so I want to put this next slide up. I hate Twitter. They call it X now. It is full of Nazis and bots and misinformation. It is not the ideal place for us to be communicating with each other. I don't have the answer to how we are going to communicate going forward. What I do know is that when you're fighting the fascists, you can't use state-owned systems of communication. Blue Sky, I would recommend. It seems like a nice place. You can find Leah and me and the Indivisible team on there. It is healthy. It is a nice community vibe. We might need to develop other systems. This isn't the only tool we can use. It's one of the tools that we can use. And we should continue evaluating what works to allow us to communicate and organize together. So with all that said, gosh, Leah, we covered a lot, but I think we just about hit our time because we're going to go into Q&A. We got a lot of questions. I'm going to remind everybody that, and people are putting in, the team is putting in the chat, we have onboarding sessions for folks who are newly to this movement or want to implement this guide coming up next week and the following week. And we have a Q&A, a live Q&A. We'll just spend the whole hour, me and Leah, answering questions that come in from the movement next Thursday as well. So this isn't our only chance to answer questions. We'll try to answer a few that were top of the list. So with that said, I'm going to go, I'll just go to the ones that were the biggest, the most asked questions here. So let's see. We got a lot of, I love this practical group. That's where our mind is. We are defined by action. A lot of questions about what is the first action that people in my group should take, and what do you think are the big national opportunities to take action? Or Leah, do you want to take a first whack at that question?
Sure. Well, not to keep harping on the main theme of the guide, it does depend on where you live and what your leverage is, right? But a lot of the things we are talking about can and should start now. You heard Senator Warren. There is a ton that Democrats can do right now to try to lock in those judges, to try to lock in as much as we can and insulate our progress against Trump, put up roadblocks and speed bumps to him. So If you've got members of Congress who you can push on that, you get in there, you start. Simultaneously, there are blue state governments that are trying to figure out what they can and should and are willing to do. We got to organize to push those folks, and we got to organize to have their backs if they are showing up and if they are delivering for us. So what I would say is, again, you're going to want to focus on what you have the most leverage on based on your particular situation. But the very first thing that I would say you should do is get together in community and create some space for people to talk about what your group is going to be and what your group is going to mean. And we've got, like, it's a 30-page guide. We've got a lot about how you actually bring that community together and how you can facilitate and manage that process, because we're not just going to throw you in there and say, good luck with that. But the key is getting started.
And on that note, getting started, so the guide includes, if you were starting an Indivisible group for the first time, how do you set up a first meeting and what should you cover? Things like, you got to come up with a name for your group. You've got to come up with a regular meeting schedule for your group. You should discuss what the first actions are, that kind of thing. We try to get very precise, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Thousands of Indivisible groups have been formed over the course of the last 8 years. This has been done again and again and again by people exactly like you. You can do it. We want to help you do it. Okay, another question, a very practical question. These ideas are interesting. I need help applying. What is a concrete thing that a blue state can do to help a red state resident? And what is a concrete thing that someone from a swing state can do to protect free and fair elections?
You want me to take that one first?
Sure.
Okay, well, so blue states have a lot of tools, right? They've got economic leverage. They can use their economic power to set standards that companies end up needing to comply with even outside of those blue states. They can file lawsuits against harmful federal actions to block stuff that's going to show up in red states. They can implement sanctuary policies for out-of-state visitors to try and protect people from red states or states that have bad laws on the books who are coming for reproductive health services, they can personally push back on some of the escalation around a deportation force and around mass deportations. There's a really wide range of different options, and we have tried to outline a whole set of them in the guide. We couldn't get literally everything because then it would be 60 pages instead of 30, but there's a lot that you can do. And it starts by asking, what does your state currently have in place, and how are they going to go big right now? And then in terms of election deniers, so if you're in an area, if you are in a swing state, well, I'll say more broadly, a lot of local election offices across the country have been facing incredibly difficult circumstances for operating, basically ever since Donald Trump went out with the big lie. They are under siege often from conspiracy theorists, from people who are showing up and making it hard for them to do their regular jobs. In many places, they have been kicked out of office by election deniers who are running and getting in and then mucking up the jobs of administering those elections. So it depends on which of those situations you're in. But if you've got somebody who's just trying to do their job and administer a fair and free election, you show up and you ask them, how can you help? What would be supportive? Do they need folks to come to the meetings where they are getting harassed by the other side? Do they need, what kind of support was tangible and useful for them? If you have got people who are on the other side, MAGA election deniers, you watch them like a hawk. You are going to organize locally to make sure everybody knows what they are up to. You are going to show up to the county meetings where they are trying to move their agenda. You are just going to make sure that they are constantly facing public scrutiny for the actions that they are trying to take in the shadows.
And I appreciate folks looking for concrete answers. What we don't want is just bumper stickers or kind of meta-analyses of what can be done. This is all where the rubber hits the road. What can you actually do? The guide has some specific ideas for actions you can take, for questions you can ask, but it's not going to have everything. The goal is to get you started in the right direction, and then a lot of this is going to come down to you. You should not ask for permission or direction. You should move and go and lead. You have the ability to do this. We can help. We are here. This is why we're offering the briefing, the onboarding sessions and the Q&A. By all means, we're doing this together. We should figure it out together. But don't think that somebody somewhere is going to tap you on the shoulder and whisper in your ear all the answers about how you can show up against fascism and to protect democracy in the coming weeks and months and years. There's nobody out there that's going to do it. It's going to depend on your leadership. We can help, but you're the leaders of this movement. So get in there, get in there. Okay, Leah, we got a good question, a few questions on safety. I'm going to just take a representative one from Bruce, who said last week's call never addressed the possibility that normal advocacy may become dangerous. What if calling your Republican congressperson to oppose a Trump bill gets your taxes audited, or the Proud Boys showing up your door? In 1933, Germany went from a multi-party democracy to an absolute dictatorship in a year. Why on earth would we imagine it can't happen here? Leah, you covered a little bit of the security section of the guide. Do you want to touch on that a bit too?
Yes. So I want to level with you. We don't know how bad it's going to get, how fast. We should expect that the Trump administration is stocked with a lot of people who are known for their desire to retaliate against their enemies, and also known for their total lack of respect for the law. And we are operating in a situation in which the Supreme Court has basically confirmed that it has no intention of allowing Trump to be held accountable for actions he takes while he's president. And that's an incredibly scary circumstance to be operating in. And like I said before, we think our best protection in this moment is safety in numbers. What we know is that if only a few of us are out there saying no, that few set of people, they're going to go after those folks. What we know is that if millions of people are out there saying no, saying this is not what our country should be, yep, that is going to be an entirely different story. So this is a situation where what I would say is we don't want to be naive about the risks, but we also want to be real, that the way that we are going to get out of this mess is by organizing together and bringing our power together.
That's right. I'm going to answer this. I'll answer this question because it's a quick one. We got it from a lot of folks in Florida and Washington, Georgia, Ohio, Colorado, lots of places. How do I find my people? Is there a group near me? This is really one of our top purposes of this call, is to answer this question and make it as easy as possible for you to find that. There is a form in the chat, super simple form, take you about 30 seconds. It will, you'll let us know where you are and what you're interested in, if you want to start a group or if you just want to find a group, or if you're in a current group and you want new members coming to it. Fill it out. We're going to follow up with you. Simple as could be. I think it's in the chat right there. It'll take it just a second. And if you know friends, family members, colleagues, neighbors, again, with Harris signs in their yard, send it to them. Let them know, hey, I'm thinking about getting together with a group here. We're going to see what we can do. That's all it takes. That's really all it takes. Got a question from a few people. What support will groups and activists get for their state / local work and advocacy, and how can you help with local partnerships? Leah, do you want to talk a little bit? We go into this in the guide too, in that last section on, so Indivisible National, we are a national organization. We support indivisible groups all around the country. Do you want to talk a little bit about what does that support look like? What does Indivisible National do for groups around the country, for the local indivisible groups?
Absolutely. So local indivisible groups, overwhelmingly volunteer-based communities, and that's something that's really core to our DNA, because fundamentally we believe that if we're going to change political power in this country, it's got to be people who are organizing, that politics is too important to be left to the professionals. So we are proud of that, and we want to do the things that we can to support you. And we also recognize that it is a locally led movement. People know what is best in their circumstances. They are organizing in partnership, often locally on the ground. They are building strategies based on what makes sense on the ground. We try to offer a set of resources that are designed to support that, from micro grants and from funding that gives people access to community building opportunities, to different kinds of funding for different efforts to collaborate across your state. We also have a set of folks on our team who are organizers who cover specific states and work directly with groups on some of the campaigns that they do. We are not able to do literally everything with everybody in the hundreds and thousands of groups across the movement, but we try to be there for some really key strategic plays. And then we also pull together for national campaigns, right? Things where we can all throw in together to be more than the sum of our parts. So you'll hear from us about how do we all come together to fight this big fight that's coming up, each recognizing that we've got a role to play based on where we are. And you'll hear from us about how do you get access to, some funding for a soundstage for your next event. All of that is outlined in the guide. We've got a whole section about some of the resources we offer and a whole web page that covers all of the different places where you can get training, resources, support if you're working with us.
Thanks, Leah. Yeah. Huge shout out to the Indivisible team. Leah and I are here right now. I don't technologically know how I would do it without the team, let alone all the prep, let alone all the support to actually create this guide. Much of the content of this guide is informed by brilliant political and policy minds, by organizing minds, by technical magicians, just on our team spread around the country. Again, Leah and I are here talking to you. It's not just us. It's not just us talking to you. We've got folks who are brilliant in their areas of expertise who are here to help. We are hitting time, so I want to end with a question that is actually kind of a hard question, but I don't want to pass it up because a lot of folks have this in this moment. Here's a version that's good. What can we even do? Can we really have impact? What do you think will be able to stop? Why do you think we'll be able to stop anything in Congress, given that we couldn't really hold electorally vulnerable R's accountable for their wild votes for the last 2 years?
Well, let me start with that end of that question, because I think it's an interesting assessment, because there are folks on this call, and I've seen them in the chat box, who in fact did a phenomenal job of the entire cycle of organizing and advocating to those Republicans. And then when those Republicans would not do what they said, kicking them out of office. And I want to shout out in particular some of the folks in New York congressional seats and California congressional seats that I know are on the call tonight. These folks got started in 2023 advocating around some of these folks in Republicans in swing districts who were vulnerable and who were not obeying their constituents or observing their constituents' concerns, who were falling in line with Trump. And did we knock out every single member of that caucus of folks? We did not. But the places where we had spirited, dedicated local organizing that held those people accountable all year round, that made sure that their constituents understood that they were not doing their jobs, those are the places where we won. So first, I want to say, goal one is to get people to vote the way that we want them to. If that doesn't work, we hold them accountable at the ballot box. So that is the cycle that we are in right now. That's part one. Part two, I don't remember. It's late. As Ezra said, we've been up a while. I don't remember the exact margins that we had in 2027 or 2017 when we successfully prevented the House from passing the Affordable Care Act the first time, but it was something around 43 seats. Is that right?
45, yeah.
45 seats. Okay. Republicans are going to have, depending on how all these confirmations shake out, depending on those final seats, they're probably going to have a margin of like 2 seats in the House. That is a completely ungovernable House majority, right? And so we are going to be in a position where we're pushing hard. Sure, Donald Trump absolutely wants to govern as a dictator. He has got a very slim margin in Congress. That is a place where we can have a real impact. And again, even when we do not succeed in stopping the thing, we're telling the story. We're making sure Americans understand how Trump is tangibly trying to bring harm into their lives, into the lives of their family, into the lives of their community. And we're setting ourselves up for the moment when a lot of Americans say, I didn't sign up for that, and it is worth my time to get out and vote and kick that guy out. So that is my quick answer. Anything you'd add, Ezra?
I mean, it's a hard question because I think the question is essentially, why should we have hope? Why should any of us have hope? And look, everybody, we've got 20,000 people on this call an hour in talking about a 30-page screed on civics, and you're here spending your night doing it. I know we're all feeling a lot of feelings, but I think one thing everybody on this call must be feeling some ounce of is determination. Trump is not omnipotent. Trump is coming into office with 49.9% of the vote. The country did not embrace fascism. The country did not embrace Project 2025. They are going to overreach. And a lot of people who didn't vote, and even some people who voted for Trump, are going to say, what the hell is this? When Trump 2.0 comes to their town dressed as callousness, as chaos, as corruption, as cruelty, a lot of Americans are going to say, what the hell? I didn't vote for this. I didn't like the price of eggs, but I didn't want fascism. And they're going to be pushing back against what their representatives and senators are doing. I don't know what's going to come. I know a lot of damage is going to be done. I'm not telling you everything's going to be okay. Nobody can tell you that. But what I can tell you is that we do still live in a representative democracy in this country. Trump is not all powerful. We have power at the federal level, at the state level, at the city level, and there will be Supreme Court election in Wisconsin in the spring. There's going to be a fight over the Trump tax cut scam in the fall. There are going to be elections in New Jersey and Virginia in November of 25. There are going to be midterm elections in 2026. That's real. That's coming. And the question is going to be, do we harness the backlash to this aggressively unpopular, damaging agenda that they're going to try to run roughshod over the country with in the coming weeks? Do we do that? I see 20,000 people here who are determined to say, yeah, that's what we're going to do. So that gives me hope. That gives me hope. It's not the end, y'all. This is not the end. Thank you for coming tonight. We're going to keep on talking about this. We're going to be working with you to implement this all over the country. Again, like Leah said, if we all do our part, some of us play offense, some of us play defense. That ladders up to the big ones we need to see. So have a good night. Get some rest. We need you well rested for the fight to come. We might even sleep a little bit too ourselves, but we'll see you hopefully next week. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Please fill out that form. Tell us whether you want to start a group or find a group or get more people into your group. We're going to do this. Thank you.